Elden Ring depicts a world that was once held together by a higher order, but which is now fractured, as warring factions, who were once united under a single divine lineage, compete for dominance over the world. This forms a symbolic and archetypal representation of how the fractured pieces of the human psyche may also conflict with one another. The story of Elden Ring has rich psychological lessons for the way in which our psyches can also shatter, when different archetypal aspects of the mind loosen themselves from the unity of the self and begin to exert their own agency. Elden Ring's conflicts and characters symbolically mirror what humans experience within their own minds, as archetypal influences seek to control the psyche and guide a person towards the fulfillment of their own instinctual patterns. Within the story of Elden Ring, we see attempts to impose order upon the world, and attempts to escape or subvert that order. We see civilizations falling and decaying, despite their vain attempts at eternality, and we see the dark shadows that inevitably swell amidst the light. We also see a recurring conflict between masters and their emissaries, as those who are truly emissaries begin to believe that they are the true masters. A conflict which rages neurologically within your own skull, between the left and right hemispheres of the brain. To get to the heart of the deep archetypal and psychological significance of Elden Ring, we will need to dive headfirst into the lore, and to elucidate the psychological symbolism, we will be using the origins and history of consciousness and the master and his emissary, which I'll reference as needed. The story begins in the lands between, which were flourishing with life and civilizations. The outer gods, who are these cosmic eldritch entities residing on another plane of existence, attempt to exert influence over the life in the lands between and gather followers to do their bidding. The most significant of these entities is known as the Greater Will, who sends the Elden Ring to the lands between. The Elden Ring is a conduit for the higher order which the Greater Will wishes to impose upon the land. Like all outer gods, the Greater Will wishes to impose its higher order upon the world, and to displace other gods who already have a presence in the lands between. The Elden Ring becomes the structure that holds the new order together, and so it represents order in the strongest sense. A metaphysical order imposed by a higher cosmic entity, and so it encapsulates the archetype of spirit. The Radiant Erdtree is the most notable symbol of the Greater Will's presence in the world, visible no matter where you go, menacingly reminding us of the Greater Will's immense power and the order it imposes upon the world. Seeking followers, the Greater Will selected a woman named Marika to become a vessel for the Elden Lord, containing it within her own body. Marika was an Empyrean, a powerful being who was a candidate for becoming a god. It's important that we distinguish between outer gods who are more cosmic and ethereal compared to just regular gods who are more tangible and have a more direct impact upon the world. In order to become a god, Marika was given a shadow. In Elden Ring, a shadow is a beast, most commonly a wolf, who acts as a kind of container for the beastly elements of a person, allowing them to strive for a higher order. Marika's shadow is Malekith, and he is deeply bound to Marika and is required to do her bidding. Marika also required an emissary, a lord consort whom she was to marry, and who she could send out into the world in order to wage war on her behalf. She selected the great warrior named Hoarah, who was given his own shadow in the form of the great lion Siraj. Siraj contained the beastly side of Hoarah, weighing down his ceaseless lust for battle, and turning him from a savage warrior into a noble lord, who takes the name Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. Marika commands her new emissary to battle against her enemies, and to subsume more beings into the Greater Will's domain. In this early age of the Erdtree, Queen Marika is the master, representing the feminine right hemisphere, and Godfrey is her emissary, representing the more masculine left hemisphere. Both are given shadows to contain their beastly sides, and align themselves more closely to the higher ideals set by the Elden Ring. The Greater Will's order psychologically represents the higher orders, which humans must conform to in order to exist as higher, tamer beings, rather than acting as primal, uncivilized beasts. This spiritual order often comes from a religion, where a particular god commands one to conform to their divine decree. It may also be imposed by one's culture, society, or government, and it is our egos that must decide whether to obey these higher principles. The ego choosing to do so inevitably leads to the formation of a personal shadow, a side of the personality which is more beast-like and is incompatible with our higher spiritual ideals. It is fitting then that Elden Ring's shadows are always lion-like or wolf-like. Marika and Godfrey both have shadows which enable them to serve the Greater Will, and these shadows obey their masters faithfully. When we later fight Godfrey in game, his shadow fights alongside him. But when he is close to defeat, Godfrey reabsorbs his shadow back into himself, once again becoming the mighty, savage warrior Hoarah. This demonstrates how the shadow can be immensely powerful and destructive when it's unleashed, and each of us carries a shadow wherein our beastly side is contained. And even though we need to force this part of ourselves away in order to have an ego, we can harness its deadly strength when we reunify with it, although doing so may be particularly dangerous and destructive. Feminine, masculine, and shadow dynamically interact within the psyche to produce the ego, the psychological construct which most humans rely on in order to act as civilized humans. The Elden Ring itself is composed of numerous runes which hold the world together, just as the ego holds the psyche together. Marika decided to pluck the rune of destined death from the Elden Ring, and she gave her shadow Malekath the task of guarding it. This removed the concept of death from the lands between, and turned Marika into Queen Marika the Eternal, as she became an immortal goddess, and she bestowed this immortality upon her demigod children. This was the founding of the Golden Order, the primary religion across the lands between, where Marika is considered the one true god. However, this religion was not universally accepted, and many other gods challenged the supremacy of the Elden Ring. The first were the Fire Giants, a civilization who inhabited the mountains to the far north of the world. Marika ordered her emissary Godfrey to slay all but one of the giants. This last remaining giant was enslaved and forced to tend a fire in a great forge.
Oh, I just got pancaked by a shield.
In my opinion, the giants, which is also true of many mythologies which feature races of giants, symbolically represent all of the cultures and civilizations who came before us, and who laid the foundations for our age to exist. They were the beings who made the first leap towards something greater, before a new order displaced them, while also establishing itself upon the foundations already laid, parasitically leapfrogging upon the achievements of the past. I think, for instance, of the great civilizations of Egypt and Mesopotamia, who led the way for the emergence of human civilization, even though the gods they once worshipped are no longer revered. Think, for example, of how Christianity, this new religion, came to dominate the Roman Empire, while the Roman gods were all but forgotten. A new order imposed itself upon a pre-existing culture, utilizing the achievements of that culture to disperse itself more widely. There are many such ancient civilizations in Elden Ring, my favorite being those belonging to the Eternal Cities. And the way in which the Greater Will seeks to spread its influence is very similar to how the ego wishes to impose its ideals upon others in order to produce greater homogeneity. Another enemy of the newly ascendant Erdtree were the Ancient Dragons. The Ancient Dragons also worshipped their own god, and they inhabited a great sky temple known as Farum Azula.
Awesome. I love this game. Oh my god.
Farum Azula is said to exist outside of time, and so these ancient dragons represent, just as they do in Dark Souls, the primordial state of the unconscious psyche before the emergence of consciousness, where there is no sense of before or after, and all exists within a timeless space, well captured by the symbol of the Ouroboros. The reptilian dragon symbolizes the ancient, primordial state of the psyche prior to the existence of the ego, when unconscious animality ruled our behavior. Of this pre-egoic state, Erich Neumann wrote the following. It functions as a transpersonal factor that was there as a psychic stage before the formation of an ego. The great dragon lord Posidoniax, who is the Elden Lord for their god, is also hermaphroditic, having both a male and female head, and so exists in a state before the separation of opposites.
Oh my god, this is amazing. What in the hell is this? Oh man. What is this Radahn shit? Oh! Oh! Dude. That was even better than Radahn. Oh. Oh shit. I'm too hyped up for this. Oh. Got hit by something else. Oh, finally. I was hitting him so much. Yeah! Oh, he's not dead! Oh, maybe that finished him off? Yes, it did! Yes! Haha!
This is how the psyche perceives the world before there is an ego to perceive a sense of past and future, and understand the separation of the world into opposites. As Neumann writes, this prehistoric state of being is not time, but eternity, just as time before the coming of man and before birth and begetting is eternity. The ancient dragons attacked the capital city of Leyndell, and the followers of the Golden Order fought back. The battle against the dragon is a common archetypal theme, which signifies the battle between consciousness and the primordial reptilian unconscious. However, once the ancient dragons were defeated, rather than being totally vanquished, they became allies to the Golden Order. Godwyn, who is the first son of Elden Lord Godfrey and Queen Marika, became companions with the Dragon Lord Fortisax. This recapitulates the theme of cooperating with our inner dragon rather than constantly resisting it, turning it into an ally rather than a foe. It also demonstrates that Marika and the Golden Order aren't necessarily out to destroy all other gods, and will form alliances with them strategically. Another enemy which opposed the Erdtree was Queen Rennala, head of the Carian royal family, who worshipped the moon as their god. To deal with this threat, Marika sent her loyal follower Radahn to battle against the Carians. But when he encountered Queen Rennala, he fell in love, repented for his aggression, and married her, and so the Order of the Erdtree and the Fate of the Moon were conjoined. This alliance greatly strengthened both factions. Radahn and Rennala had 3 demigod children. Now, you might be wondering how they could be demigods if neither of their parents are gods, and the answer is that Radahn is actually Marika. They are the same entity.
Oh, man.
Radahn is the male form of Queen Marika, but we'll explain this more in greater detail soon. After the conquest of most of the lands between by the Golden Order, a new age of the Erdtree began, and it was filled with abundance and flourishing. But it was not to last. As Marika no longer needed her emissary to wage war, she exiled her husband Godfrey away to another land, and he became the first Tarnished. At the same time, Radahn abandoned his marriage to the lunar queen Rennala, who was left heartbroken. He did leave behind his red wolf, who I believe to be Radagon's shadow, which he left behind to defend Raya Lucaria Academy and possibly keep his ex-wife imprisoned there. He returned to Leyndell and became Queen Marika's second consort, which, yes, means that Marika married herself, or himself. Again, Marika and Radahn are the respective feminine and masculine sides of the same person. And for now, they appear to be relatively unified in mind and will. This self-fecundating god produced 2 powerful twin children, who were both Empyrean, meaning that they could become gods as well. All appeared to be well, until somebody managed to steal a fragment of the Rune of Death, which Marika's shadow Malakath was supposed to be guarding. This fragment of the Rune of Death was then used to slay a demigod, Marika's first child, Godwyn the Golden, becoming the first of the demigods to die. Malakath binds the Rune of Death to his own flesh to prevent it from being tampered with again, but the damage is already done. In the chaos caused by the death of a demigod, Marika decides to betray the Greater Will. You see, despite being a vassal for the Greater Will and the Golden Order, Marika, who represents the right hemisphere, is able to transcend this conditioning and go beyond the will imposed upon her. The left hemisphere tends to be trapped in whatever order it has absorbed from religion or culture, and it tends to be very rigid, keeping the structure of the ego intact, and resisting anything which threatens the integrity of the ego structure. The left hemisphere is responsible for the rigidity people have when defending their opinions, which they hold onto despite evidence to the contrary. It's also responsible for the bias towards that which is familiar and well known, while being aversive to new ideas which tread too far from the familiar. The right hemisphere is able to break this conditioning, to go its own way, so to speak, rather than being beholden to what it has integrated in the past, traversing new, untrodden paths with openness and curiosity. Its nature is more stochastic, random, and chaotic, allowing it to introduce a little anarchy and shake up the old order, thereby facilitating psychological transformation. This is a theme which repeats itself several times through other characters. And so Marika, against the wishes of the Greater Will, shatters the Elden Ring, shattering the force that was holding the world together, and throwing everything into chaos. Each of her demigod children receives a piece of the shattered Elden Ring. The right hemisphere is able to break the sense of stability and constancy which the ego and the left hemisphere feel. This can cause a rupture within the mind and the dissociation of different aspects of the psyche which were previously held together by the ego, and this is symbolically captured by the shattering of the Elden Ring. Now, despite being the same person as Marika, Radahn is still loyal to the Golden Order, which indicates that the two halves of Marika's personality have become dissociated from each other, and are operating independently with distinct wills, reflecting how the two hemispheres of the brain can become totally alien and independent of each other whenever there's an internal conflict. Radahn attempts to repair the shattered Elden Ring with his hammer, in a manner analogous to the left hemisphere attempting to keep the psyche together, but to no avail, and so the world is plunged into chaos. Marika is imprisoned within the Erd Tree for defying the Golden Order, while Radahn, who is really the emissary to Marika, begins to act like a parasitic master, doing exactly what the Golden Order demands with no desire to act autonomously. Left and right function optimally when there's a proportionate distribution of power amongst them, but their contrary natures can also cause conflicts, and the left hemisphere may attempt to dominate the right in a situation which assigns too much power to the left hemispheric emissary and not enough to the right hemispheric master. And this is exactly what happens to Queen Marika, as she remains imprisoned, while Radahn is free to do what he wills. The consequences of this power imbalance appear to be the stagnation and corruption of the Golden Order. Marika's children, the Demigods who were once united, begin to fight against each other in the Great Shattering War. Just as the Elden Ring represents the fractured psyche, the various demigods each symbolically represent a different aspect of the psyche, some encompassing whole archetypes, while others represent a particular characteristic of an archetype. The demigods warring against one another represents the pieces of the shattered psyche vying for dominance, and our quest is to reintegrate these autonomous elements back into a unified whole, should we choose. So this video will be a breakdown of the demigods, their archetypal significance, and how they relate to the overall story in Elden Ring. But before that, I have a quick message from our sponsor. I'm kidding, there is no sponsor. There never is. But I do have a message for you, which is that I am at the end of my ropes. I am utterly destitute, laid on rent, and in fact, I was evicted a month ago. The only reason I'm still here is because I keep changing the locks. Oh shit, be quiet.
I know you're in there. Hey, give me rent.
I've been forced to eat cardboard, and soon I'll have to start eating my book collection, which includes the Red Book, and I know that after eating this, Philemon is going to be haunting my dreams. You see, I pour hours and hours into these videos, and while it's fun, I basically receive no compensation for it, apart from my few patrons who I deeply appreciate. This is why I'm asking you, if you want to see the sequel to this video where I discuss the Shadow of the Erd Tree, which was released today, please consider donating to me on PayPal. There's a link in the description where you can donate to me, and any amount helps, and you'll be investing in the future of this channel. Thank you, and let's get on with it. One of the first significant bosses I encountered in the game was Rennala, Queen of the Moon. While not a demigod herself, her character is very significant for the story, as she wields a great rune, and symbolically, she represents certain aspects of the mother archetype as well as femininity in general. Before Radahn left to go fuck himself, literally, he gave Rennala an amber egg, which Rennala clutches and guards closely like it's a baby. We find her doing so inside the library at Raya Lucaria Academy, where she has been imprisoned. Her amber egg actually contains the great rune of the unborn, which allows for rebirth. Eggs in general often represent the place of origination, the unified state before the coming of opposites from which all living things emerge. They are connected to the mother because mothers and their wombs are the place of origination for every single human being. Psychologically, the mother archetype is also the place of origins for the nascent ego, which has yet to detach itself from the mother. Origination appears to be represented by all of these paraplegic female PhD students Rennala is continuously producing who are singing,
"Sleep tight, bound tight by mother's amber. Sleep tight, find life in mother's umbra."
These words capture the fact that the mother is a place where the nascent ego can go to seek rest, where no effort is required at all because we are cared for by our mothers, as though mother and child formed a single entity. But these new children Rennala keeps producing are feeble and weak, which highlights what can happen when we are unable to detach ourselves from the mother. We become completely reliant on her. This blissful state requires no ego because the child has no need of autonomy. All of our needs are met by the mother. And so the ego only appears for fleeting moments before submerging again in the blissful slumber of the cradling mother. Just as the child is originally just an organ within the womb of its mother, the psyche of the infant is closely tied to the mother, and the mother archetype causes us to see our mothers as extensions of ourselves. As Neumann writes, there is as yet no conflict, For the original containment of the child in the maternal Ouroboros is a state of uninterrupted reciprocal bliss. This is why Rennala is associated with the moon and with night, because sleeping causes the ego to completely dissolve, a situation which is similar to being bound to our mothers. And while asleep, we can peacefully escape the stress of having an ego. It mirrors the intimate relationship between mother and child. The psyche produces these symbols, such as the connection between femininity and the moon, to try and express basic patterns that occur within our lives in an attempt to draw our attention to these archetypal features of our existence. The way Rennala clutches her amber egg embracingly is reminiscent of precisely what the child desires when under the control of the mother archetype, to be enveloped by the mother without having to exert any effort at all. However, this pre-egoic state of the dominance of the mother archetype is only a temporary refuge, an illusion which inevitably breaks as the child's ego emerges, and it must contend with reality. I think this is why Rennala appears to be caught adrift in a delusion, which she uses to escape the pain of being left by her husband Radahn, as her peaceful slumber is similar to what the child experiences when embraced by the mother. In order for the ego to become an independent agent capable of acting autonomously, it must cleave itself from the influence of the mother archetype, an act which is often met with the greatest resistance. Because independence is hard and it's much simpler to just be dependent on somebody. After you defeat her first phase, Rennala appears to awaken from her slumber, which is when the fight actually becomes difficult. But during this, you hear the voice of Ranni, Rennala's demigod daughter, warning us,
Upon my name is Ranni the Witch. Mother's rich slumber shall not be disturbed by thee.
But we do disturb her slumber and defeat her. But she doesn't die, and instead allows us to use her rune to experience rebirth, which in the game is just respeccing or redesigning your character. Rebirth is an essential aspect of the feminine, and the feminine parts of our psyches play a significant role in the process of psychological rebirth, which I will explain when I talk about Elden Ring's representation of the Anima, Ranni the Witch.
Unless, of course, thou shouldst take the crown.
Ranni represents the Anima. I don't even need to justify that, it's proven by the fact that more Elden Ring players select this ending over all the others. But there is an important insight here, because the ego develops by defeating the mother, so to speak, by separating from her. But at a later stage, the ego is drawn back to the feminine, not back to the mother, but towards a transformed version of the feminine, which takes the form of the Anima. This is why after she's defeated, Rennala's words to us are,
Little Ranni, my dear daughter, weave thy might into being.
passing on the torch to her daughter to carry out the next phase of the hero's journey. The word anima means soul, and it's a term which is meant to capture the powerful, numinous influence this archetype can have over our minds, especially the minds of men. We first meet Ranni in a seemingly random encounter at night, like the Anima appearing in our dreams. But we meet her more officially after we make the arduous journey through Carrion Manor. Through her quest, we learn more about Ranni. Firstly, she is an Empyrean, which means that she is a candidate for becoming a god and succeeding Queen Marika. For this reason, she was given her own shadow, who we know of as Blaidd the Half-Wolf. Blaidd serves Ranni faithfully, but Ranni herself wanted no part in the Greater Will's designs. Seeking to rid herself of its influence and forge her own destiny, Ranni orchestrated the Night of the Black Knives. It was her who stole a fragment of the Rune of Death from Marika's shadow, and she uses it to kill her own body, which was tainted by the influence of the Greater Will. But in order for this to work, she also needed to kill her demigod half-brother Godwin. God damn it, who named these characters? This means that it was Ranni who fundamentally broke the order of the world. Again, we see how it's the feminine anima, or the right hemisphere, which allows us to transcend the order imposed upon us and go in our own direction, rather than being beholden to what has been imposed upon us by religion or society. The anima has a kind of chaotic nature, which reveals hidden paths for the psyche to traverse, whereas the animus, i.e. the masculine counterpart to the anima, tends to stick with the stagnation of the old order. So whenever we want to make significant change and transcend our own egos, it's the anima which facilitates this. There are other aspects of Ranni which encapsulate characteristics of the anima archetype. The fact that she inhabits a new body is indicative of rebirth, and how destroying pieces of the old order, represented by the death of Godwin and the death of her old body, can initiate an ego death, which eventually turns into the rebirth of a new ego. She is also associated with snow, as her current form was inspired by a formidable snow witch. Snow and winter are symbols of a particular aspect of femininity, not the life-giving femininity of the mother, but the cold state of stasis and slumber, which facilitates regeneration in time for spring. It is associated with emotions like sadness, somberness, and melancholy, emotions which men often flee from, but which women are generally better at accepting. And it is necessary to pass through such emotions to experience rejuvenation, unpleasant though they may be. Ranni is also associated with the moon, another feminine symbol which is often contrasted with the masculine sun. But unlike the blinding light of the sun, the light of the moon is a cold, pale light, and sometimes the dark moon casts no light at all. Like winter, it captures somberness and melancholy, but also numinosity and new possibilities, and the moon is a common mythological symbol of femininity. The moon represents where we could potentially go if we attempt to escape from the stagnation of constancy, which stubbornly demands that things remain the same and unchanging. It is a new, unforeseen journey, which necessitates casting away the shackles of the old order, which prefers familiarity and stability. Ranni asks us to partner with her half-wolf Shadow to help her overthrow the Golden Order. This highlights an interesting relationship between the Shadow and the Anima, because the Shadow is spawned from the ego attempting to align itself with the higher order, and so the Shadow contains everything we discard for being incompatible with this order. But the Anima, which is capable of transcending such imposed orders, may facilitate the integration of the Shadow by allowing us to see the Shadow as part of ourselves rather than as something separate, making it possible for us to accept our shadows rather than condemning it. This is why Blaidd is our best buddy, for now. We learn that Ranni's destiny is tied to the movement of the stars, as the stars often represent the concept of destiny and fate. This symbolizes how the activity of the anima within our own psyches seems to be something beyond the ego's control, like fate itself. But there's only one problem: General Radahn. Radahn is another one of the demigods, and is in fact Ranni's full brother, son of Radahn and Rennala. But unlike Ranni, who wishes to escape from the Golden Order, Radahn embraced it, greatly admiring his father Radahn and the first Elden Lord Godfrey. To serve the Golden Order, Radahn learned gravity magic, and using his enormous power, he began to control the motions of the stars, literally holding destiny at bay. Part of the reason Radahn is holding back the stars is to protect the Golden Order and prevent a different outer god from infiltrating and spreading. But it is also to seize destiny by the throat and exert total control over the fate of the cosmos. By controlling destiny itself, Radahn ensures the continued survival of the Golden Order, even as it becomes corrupted and susceptible to decay. Radahn represents a very typical characteristic of the left hemisphere and the masculine animus, namely that it is obsessed with control and using its willpower to dominate fate itself. It is associated with authoritarian tyranny, as it attempts to control everything, including other people, in order to perpetuate its ideal and crush any opposition. The ego is the part of us that feels like it has free will, and this sense of its own free will is bolstered by the masculine animus, and Radahn represents the sense of will which the animus possesses, as it desires absolute control. This obsession with willpower within masculinity is evident from history's dictators, men who were so powerful that they changed the world in irreversible ways. Like Napoleon, who reshaped Europe according to his vision, although that's an overused example. I prefer Hayam Morgott of the Majapahit Empire. The left hemisphere also controls the right hand, which for most of us is the hand we use to seize the objects of the world and manipulate them, and so it's strongly tied to our capacity to influence our environments. Even our sense that we have control over our own muscles and body movements originates from the ego. The fact that Radahn learned gravity magic in order to accomplish his conquest of the stars also reminds me of how consciousness of the facts of science, of the facts of nature, allows us to manipulate those laws in accordance with our wills, as ego consciousness and its capacity to explicitly understand the laws governing reality grants us immense power over the physical world. This really reminds me of how, in real life, learning the laws of gravity gave us the power to escape gravity, and escape our fate of being stuck on this planet. The struggle which the ego must partake in is ultimately a struggle for control of its own fate. But this can become dangerous in those who are overly ambitious and wield far too much power. Radahn's conquest of the very stars symbolizes this aspect of masculinity. When we go to defeat Radahn, we find his kingdom of Caelid to be, well, not exactly right. Radahn himself has been reduced to madness for reasons which I'll come back to, but he is still somehow able to hold back the stars. After an epic fight, Radahn is defeated, which causes a meteor to strike the lands between and allows the stars to resume their natural motion, putting Ranni's destiny back into the realm of possibility. We seek the eternal city of Nokron to find the Finger Slayer Blaidd, which Ranni can use to slay the Two Fingers, which are these creepy things which are connected to the Greater Will's presence in the world. I find it rather interesting that each part of Ranni's quest has us going underground into the ruins of ancient civilizations, like digging into the unconscious. Through her quest, you get to explore some of what are, in my opinion, Elden Ring's most beautiful places. And even the color palette used in these areas, to me, feels more Anima-like, more numinous, more mysterious, and enchanted, in contrast to these brighter areas which are associated with the Golden Order. Ranni's attempt to displace the Golden Order leads to them sending assassins after her. These assassins are called the Baleful Shadows, and we need to dispatch them. After this, and going through some additional trouble involving Lovecraftian cosmic entities who are trying to infiltrate the planet and presumably manipulate Ranni just as the Greater Will manipulated Marika, Ranni finally selects us to be her consort in the new age which she wishes to bring about. But when we next encounter our friend Blaidd, he is immensely conflicted. Blaidd was created by the Greater Will to be Ranni's shadow. But because Ranni wishes to displace the Greater Will, Blaidd becomes hostile to us, and we fight him in the saddest fight ever. You see, the Golden Order represents a higher set of principles for people to obey, and so it creates a particular shadow. The shadow takes on a specific form based on the higher ideals which a person is trying to align with. And the form of that shadow is determined by whatever it is that the Golden Order disdains. But when Ranni's new age begins, this previous shadow disappears, and is presumably replaced by a different shadow, although in this case it doesn't appear that any new shadow forms. And I think this is why Ranni's quest ends in you killing Blaidd, because as the old order dies, so does the shadow it produces. The transformation of the shadow is a natural consequence of individuation. So as we proceed towards the Erd Tree to bring forth this new age, we learn about a war taking place between the forces of the Erd Tree and the forces of the Volcano Manor. Praetor Rykard is Lord of the Volcano Manor, and is Ranni's other brother, a demigod born of Rennala and Radahn. Rykard is similar to Ranni in that he also distrusts the Golden Order and wishes to find his own path in the world rather than bending to the Greater Will. But his manner of doing so is pretty weird.
I'm just as confused as you are, dude.
Very well.
Whatever's going on, I agree to it.
Join myself and King as remedy.
Sure.
Together we will devour the very god.
That is something I can get on board with.
But it's also highly archetypally symbolic. Deep within the crater of the volcano, Rykard discovered an ancient primordial entity, the god-devouring serpent. Rykard chooses to join forces with this serpent, and he even allows it to devour him, unifying with it into a single being. From henceforth, he is known as the Lord of Blasphemy, and he wages a war against the Golden Order. Anybody who is familiar with the mythological significance of the snake knows that the snake is one of the most important symbols in depth psychology. I mean, just look at this painting Jung made in the Red Book of a snake bursting forth from a volcano. The snake typically represents the primordial reptilian unconscious, the basic instinctual urges and drives which linger within the depths of the human psyche. But representing the unconscious as a snake conveys a particular notion. Namely, it gives the unconscious a negative overtone, because humans are naturally afraid of snakes and inherently see them as something evil. And so Rykard's choice to embrace his reptilian foundations is depicted as something wrong and blasphemous. Rykard's union with the snake shows that he has been assimilated by the unconscious, completely consumed by it. Just as the ego initially breaks from the unconscious through the mythological dragon fight, it can also reunify with the unconscious, but not always in a manner which is positive, as doing so may simply be a regression back into our primitive base instincts, which are ordinarily held back for good reason. That the snake represents our instinctual side is clear from the fact that it devours gods, as the instinct for food, hunger, is arguably the most ancient and primitive instinct that we possess. Hunger can often override all of our higher values, as anyone who has ever faced starvation knows all too well. And so Rykard unifying with this serpent represents him regressing into his base instincts, which is seen as abhorrent by the Golden Order and also everyone else. And so we proceed to battle against Rykard and his god-devouring serpent within the crater of the volcano.
Oh shit. Wasn't expecting the snake to come back to life. Come on, come on, come on! Ah! No, come on! Oh no, how is he not dead? Oh, holy crap. Finally.
And even after Rykard is defeated, we find his wife trying to eat him, trying to become one with him.
Delicious.
Oh, you... Allow me some time.
Yeah, take your time.
This carcass is vast and not easily consumed.
I mean, if I was eating this,
Rykard,
I would like to do so in private as well.
find purchase within me. I wish to be your serpent, your family. One day, let us devour the gods together.
Now, this is not to say that joining with one's unconscious is necessarily bad, but it can be bad in certain contexts, especially if the unconscious completely absorbs the ego rather than forming a cooperative partnership with it. Rykard and his god-devouring serpent represent a regression back into the primitive world of instinct, which is something which can happen when people become loosened from their moral foundations and evolve back into animals, whose only goal is the satisfaction of their base instinct. This happens commonly when order breaks down, and it is genuinely horrifying when people suddenly become animals again. Now, at this point, you might be wondering why I haven't mentioned Godric. Anyways, when we finally reach Leyndell and approach the Erd Tree to become Elden Lord, we are challenged by the King of Leyndell, Morgott the Omen, son of Marika and the first Elden Lord Godfrey. Morgott tells us that his demigod siblings and half-siblings are all traitors, and so in a sense, King Morgott is refusing to allow the shattered Elden Ring to heal, which characterizes the stubbornness of the ego and its unwillingness to repair damages, either within the psyche or even within our own interpersonal relationships. The ego is often responsible for stubbornly holding on to grudges, as it wishes to maintain its sense of its own rightness, an experience which I'm sure everybody listening to this has witnessed. Morgott is entirely loyal to the Golden Order, and seeks to uphold its principles, and destroy all that it disdains. This is ironic, because Morgott himself is afflicted by the Omen Curse, and these accursed beings, who are known for their large horns, are reviled by the Golden Order, and are ruthlessly hunted. And so Morgott is loyal to a religion in which he himself is condemned. Its king bears the very curse which it persecutes. This hypocrisy highlights the corruption and stagnation of the Golden Order, which is clinging on despite all of the chaos spreading across the world. There are many other groups who the Golden Order persecutes, including the Albinaurics, the Misbegotten, and significantly, those who live in death. Remember, Marika originally used her shadow Malekith to remove death from the world. In Marika's Golden Order, death itself is repressed using the shadow, so that the gods can enjoy a perpetual state of immortality. But as we know, Ranni subverted this design, reintroducing death into the world by slaying a demigod, Godwyn the Golden. Godwyn's corpse is now spreading death into the roots of the world, causing the undead to spawn, and such beings are referred to as those who live in death. The Golden Order hunts those who live in death, and attempts to return the lost pieces of death back to Malekith, so that he can contain death as he was ordered to do. We find Malekith in the Bestial Sanctum, where he is known as Geraint, the Beast Clergyman, a title which has clear religious connotations. In this chapel, the Beast Clergyman appears to be greatly tormented by his appetite for Deathroot. The concept of sin, which means failing to live up to one's higher principles, is connected to the struggle we feel with our shadows, and it's largely responsible for the conflicted state of humanity. The idea of sin drives parts of our nature into the psychological shadow, where they continue to exist, and sinning means to falter, to let the shadow loose momentarily, rather than keeping it contained, which causes a sense of moral failure which people must frequently deal with. We join the Golden Order in hunting death, and we return to the Bestial Sanctum to feed Malekith the pieces of Deathroot we find. But his appetite never appears to be sated, and he even loses control and attacks us. But after all the Deathroot is consumed, he realizes there is nothing he can do to conquer his appetite.
It is all consumed. Still, I am not sated.
Still?
Not nearly sated.
I gave you 10 pieces of death root.
Marika, is this what it is to sin?
To be always hungry?
Will things never be the same again? But I have done all I can in this land. Henceforth, mine appetite shall be my sole companion.
No, come on, we can still be friends.
And so he decides to leave the Sanctum and travel to Farum Azula, the sky temple inhabited by the dragons, which exists beyond time. This is significant because there's a sense in which the origins of the shadow lie in the primordial depths of the psyche, the more ancient parts of the unconscious represented by the snake or by the dragon, which, though totally a product of nature, may be incompatible with the values of society. Malekith venturing to a land beyond time symbolizes the total sublimation of the shadow by the unconscious, returning back to its original state before the concept of sinning even exists. It represents a return to the natural state of being prior to consciousness, because consciousness is what causes the shadow to become a distinct entity. This allows Malekith to exist without being tormented by the shadow's incompatibility with the ego, and so he can live in a tranquil state of peace prior to the origins of consciousness, just like animals blissfully do. We will come back to this concept later when we venture to Farum Azula. Back at the royal capital, when the Omen King is defeated, we find the door to the Erd Tree blocked. We are directed north in order to seek a source of fire which can burn the Erd Tree and allow us to become Elden Ward. However, as we venture north, we hear whispers of more demigods who are active in the world. This is when we learn of Miquella and Malenia, the twin prodigies. And so we venture north towards a place shrouded in secrecy and concealed by a blizzard to seek these hidden demigods, encountering many of their followers along the way.
Consecrated Snowfield. That's a beautiful name. Oh man. That's a beautiful character that I'm fighting right now. I mean, yeah, it's a shame that I have to kill them, but they attacked me first. They didn't know my intentions in here. This is just self-defense. And, very effective self-defense.
These two demigods are the twin children of Radahn and Marika, which should technically mean they are full gods, right? Since they are technically born from a single god? But maybe this is why they are both Empyreans, which means they are both candidates for becoming a god in the future. Miquella and Malenia are inseparable and have formed a very close bond to each other, but they also both seem to be cursed. Malenia's curse is that she is afflicted with the Scarlet Rot. This is a disease which can affect all living things, and causes them to decay in both mind and body. But we also learn that the Scarlet Rot is itself an outer god, one much older than the Greater Will, which was locked away deep beneath the earth. The Scarlet Rot appears to be a form of life, but not any form of life, rather a form of life which thrives in the constant breakdown of structure, decaying and rotting living beings into ever smaller units. It feeds itself through the acceleration of entropy, by generating disorder. It reminds me more of bacterial life, which consists of smaller units, in contrast to plants and animals, which are more structured. And indeed, bacterial infections attempt to rot away our highly structured bodies. The obliteration of order and structure means that the rot-afflicted Malenia, just like Ranni, also represents a form of feminine chaos. But here we see why this chaos can become dangerous when pushed to the extreme, as the Scarlet Rot prevents the formation of any structure and causes everything to fall apart. Malenia represents a dark aspect of chaos, which is that too much chaos, rather than transforming the old order, can completely obliterate it and prevent any order from taking its place. Order, though susceptible to corruption, is necessary both psychologically and societally, as it creates stability, regularity, and constancy. Chaos undermines this stability, which makes it difficult to adjust amidst constant change. Anybody who has faced chaos within their own lives knows just how stressful it can be, and those who face constant chaos often wish for stability at any cost. Psychologically, this also reminds me of schizophrenia, where the mind is stuck in a chaotic, fragmented state, for which reason schizophrenics often have difficulty forming a stable sense of self through which they can center their psyches. Even Malenia herself must make an active effort to combat the rot within herself before it destroys her body and mind. And we learn that Millicent is trying to return Malenia's sense of self. As she says,
There is something I must return to Malenia. The will that was once her own. The dignity. The sense of self. That allowed her to resist the call of the Scarlet Rot. The pride she abandoned. To meet Radahn's measure.
And the symbol of the new order, which she and her twin brother wish to bring about, the Halig tree, has itself become corrupted by the Scarlet Rot, and the Halig tree appears to be sick and dying.
Why is there just rot everywhere in this game?
The Scarlet Rot is also why Caelid is one of the most menacing places I've ever visited in a video game. It is filled with creatures who have gone mad and are falling apart. But why is Caelid like this? The answer is that Malenia, just like us, came here to challenge General Radahn. Radahn represents the extreme side of order, and Malenia represents the extreme side of chaos, and their clash represents the battle between these two extremes. However, in her attempt to defeat Radahn, Malenia decided to unleash the chaos within her rather than keeping it contained, afflicting the entire region with the Scarlet Rot and turning it into a perilous hellscape. This is why Radahn has been reduced to madness when we encounter him, as his mind has been fragmented beyond repair. However, it's not clear why Malenia needed to fight Radahn in the first place, but the most likely reason has to do with her twin brother Miquella, because in case you didn't know, Malenia is
Blaidd of Miquella.
So what's the significance of Miquella? Miquella, who is described as amongst the most formidable of the demigods, was also born with a curse, the effect of which is to keep him in a perpetual state of nascence, which is why he appears to be a child despite being as old as the other demigods. This childlike appearance implies that Miquella represents the child archetype, the archetype which activates in the minds of new parents and causes them to nurture and love their children and see them as radiant divine beings. In fact, we learn that Miquella is capable of compelling affection from others, causing people to love him, which in the game is portrayed as something sinister and terrifying. But this is exactly the archetypal effect the child has on the minds of the parents. However, there is also a strong archetypal connection between the child archetype and what Jungians refer to as the self archetype, which is the archetype of unity and wholeness. The child itself emerges from the union of male and female, and the young child is a living embodiment of the archetypal psyche, since a child is entirely ruled by the archetypes before they develop an ego. As Neumann writes, in the child, the great images and archetypes of the collective unconscious are living reality, and very close to him. Such knowledge is rightly regarded as ancestral knowledge, and the child as a reborn forebear. In his early years, Miquella was loyal to the Golden Order, and greatly admired his older half-brother Godwyn. He attempted to cure his sister Malenia of the Scarlet Rot, but found that the Golden Order could offer nothing to help. This is why he began exploring unalloyed gold, gold which could rid oneself of the influence of the outer gods. The symbolic significance of this is that Miquella is attempting to forge his own path away from the influence of the outer gods, which is characteristic of the hero choosing their own path rather than being beholden to another, meaning that they are beholden to themselves. Their own principles become the foundation upon which a new order can be established. Miquella, who is the embodiment of love, also began to see the Golden Order's persecution of certain beings, such as the Albinaurics and the Misbegotten, as wrong and immoral. Using his immense strength, Miquella decided to create his own order, abandoning the Erd tree and creating the Halig tree, a tree where beings who are persecuted and disdained may find refuge and acceptance.
Whoa. This place is magical. Are you gonna attack me? Fun combat.
Here we find many of those who are hunted by the Golden Order, as they are accepted and loved by Miquella.
I mean, these guys are just praying. Do I really want to kill them? Probably.
I think Miquella also forms a very interesting parallel with Jesus, another character who represents the self-archetype, as Jesus attempted to transform his religion from one which disdained certain groups, like prostitutes and those with leprosy, to one which accepted all with love and compassion. Jesus has left an enormous mark upon our world, as he preached a philosophy of unconditional love and warmth. And the reason we still worship this man is because of the mythology surrounding him, which captures the self-archetype, and so it grips our minds archetypally. and it allows us to partake in a religion in which we feel like we are loved by God. Miquella plays a similar role in Elden Ring, creating an order which does not define itself by what it hates, but rather by what it loves. However, the Halig tree appears to be failing of its promise, as it too has become infected with the Scarlet Rot.
What's all this? Whoa. Is the tree dead? I'm guessing that's the bulk of it, but it's all stunted. This is the city?
We venture through the Halig tree to find the source of the rot, and find Miquella's sister Malenia there. She attacks us, and after we easily defeat her...
I am Malenia.
Okay.
Blaidd of Miquella.
Oh shit. So it doesn't matter how much damage I do. Oh god, why am I not running? This damn DualShock 3 controller is failing on me. What the fuck? Oh my god. Phew! Okay.
She assumes her final form, finally letting herself go completely to the rot and becoming a goddess of rot. She is no longer herself, but has become entirely a vessel for this outer god. And after another very easy fight...
Oh, fucking hell. Ah!
Be consumed by the scarlet rot.
Oh god, get away! Ah!
Let your flesh be consumed.
God just chasing me down and grabs me?
Scarlet rot.
What a disrespectful way to kill somebody. I'm just gonna flail around in the background.
Consumed.
Oh!
Flesh be consumed.
Ow! Burn it! Burn the scarlet rot! God damn it! Come on, get me out! Holy crap. That is insane. But maybe it's another window. There's some fireballs! Oh no, attacking me again. What? What on earth is this?
Be consumed by the
How is that an attack? Are you kidding me? Oh! 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 My lord, what an insane moment that was. Oh, I need to take a breather. Okay. Okay, let's get into it. Oh my god! Oh my god!
the mark of a true.
Oh, thank you. That makes me feel so good that you say that. Especially coming from you. Oh.
Dear Miquella. Oh, dearest Miquella. My brother. I'm sorry.
I finally met my match.
Dude, hearing those words was so cathartic. Oh man. My heart is pumping right now. Holy crap.
We find that Miquella, who had implanted himself in the Helig Tree, is missing. We learn that he has been kidnapped by another demigod who is attempting to found a new dynasty. This demigod is Mohg. Mohg is the twin brother of King Morgott, both of whom are afflicted with the Omen curse. But unlike Morgott, who despised the Omen, Mohg reveled in it. Mohg was shunned and locked underneath the capital city, where all of the omens are kept. Here he came into contact with another outer god, named the Formless Mother, and agreed to become her vassal. Deep underground, he creates a palace and kidnaps the Empyrean Miquella. We venture here to learn his plan, which is to allow Miquella to become a god, and then marry him so that he can become his lord consort and emissary, founding a new dynasty to overthrow the Erdtree. There's a lot going on here, but I think what Mohg archetypally represents is related to the outer god whom he worships, the Formless Mother. We yet again have a depiction of the Mother archetype, but in a much darker and more toxic context, showing how the Mother archetype can stifle the psychological development of the ego against the will of the individual. Miquella represents the child, while Mohg acts as an agent for the Great Mother. Miquella is stuck in his cocoon in an unborn state, which appears to represent how the mother can keep the child perpetually locked in a state of nascence, retaining him in a dependent state where he is incapable of acting autonomously. This is why his cocoon appears to be resting on a set of pelvic bones, representing being stuck in the womb of the mother. While the mother is the source of new life, the mother can take on a toxic relationship to the child when she is too deeply controlled by her own child archetype. In this situation, the mother effectively smothers the psychological maturation of the child, keeping him in a state of perpetual youth where he is unable to mature into an adult. And since the child can simply relax and avoid hardship, he often accepts this state willingly, to the detriment of his own psychological maturation. The unwillingness to allow for the separation of child and mother is described as a form of psychological incest. As Neumann writes, it is the form of incest taken by the infantile ego, which is still close to the mother, and has not yet come to itself. But the sick ego of the neurotic can also take this form, and so can a later exhausted ego that creeps back to the mother after having found fulfillment. This can take place within the context of the mother-child relationship, but this can also occur individually at the psychological level, whenever somebody refuses to grow up and heroically tackle the challenges of life, instead preferring to retreat into pleasure and comfort. Remember, Mohg is attempting to marry his half-brother, which is filled with incestuous implications, and he is doing so on behalf of the Formless Mother, and Miquella is not at all a willing participant in this bloody sacrament. Mohg is also known as the Lord of Blood. His palace grounds are utterly soaked with blood, and there is a deep archetypal connection between blood and the mother. Blood was mythologically seen as the source of fertility, which is clear from menstrual blood, which fertilizes the child within the womb. Blood is also connected with death, and the blood spilled from death is used to fertilize the earth, which itself is a kind of universal mother for all beings, Mother Earth. We often observe in mythology a reciprocal relationship between symbols, as the earth is used metaphorically to represent the psychological situation of the nascent ego, and the mother is used metaphorically to elucidate certain features of the earth, such as fertility. This shows how mythological symbols facilitate greater consciousness, both of our own psychology and of the external world, showing how the internal often mirrors the external. And in various myths, we often see the Great Mother using the blood of the child to fertilize herself. And at the psychological level, this essentially refers to the ego becoming absorbed by the mother archetype, which can rule over the psyche and sap power from the ego. In writing about the connection between blood and femininity, Neumann writes, "The womb of the earth clamors for fertilization, and blood sacrifices and corpses are the food she likes best. Everywhere, blood plays a leading part in the fertility ritual and human sacrifice. The great terrestrial law that there can be no life without death was early understood, and still earlier represented in ritual, to mean that a strengthening of life can only be bought at the cost of sacrificial death." And so I believe that Miquella is being sacrificed against his will so that Mohg and the Formless Mother can use him for their own ascendancy, toxically feeding off of him to fertilize their own ambitions, just as the healthy maturation of the child is sacrificed so that the toxic mother can hold on to her pet. Like I alluded to before, this can refer to an actual mother-child relationship, but it also represents an unconscious psyche, which is unwilling to allow for the formation of an individual ego, since the unconscious is kind of like the mother to the ego, and may also trap the ego in a state of immaturity. Thankfully, we are here to stop this madness, and after our fight with Mohg...
Dearest Miquella,
Oh man, he's infatuated.
you must abide alone a while. Welcome, honored guest, to the birthplace of our dynasty.
This is the birthplace of your dynasty? Actually no. It's pretty cool. I really wish the Blaidd of Miquella was here to take care of this problem. But I killed her.
Miquella is mine and mine alone.
I'm starting to consider giving Miquella to him. Oh, yes, it did it!
As clear as day. The coming of our dynasty.
Mohg is defeated, and the Formless Mother's plans are thwarted. But Miquella is still unresponsive, and it was only recently that we learned that he has left his body in order to venture to the Land of Shadow, which we will explore in the Shadow of the Erdtrees. So there is still potentially much more to say about Miquella, and his story appears to be even more archetypally entrenched, perhaps relating back to the self-archetype. After all of this is said and done, we proceed to the mountaintops of the Giants to defeat the last fire giant, who was imprisoned by the Golden Order in order to tend a great fire.
What? That was so cool. Should I get Alexander in here? Screw it, let's do it for one fight. Roll. Wow. Alexander was extremely helpful. You just, I mean, look at him. Look at him slowly march into battle. I'll be there momentarily. Oh, close. What am I attacking right now? Oh. I know I'm gonna screw this up somehow. Oh. Just gotta wait and see what, how. Oh, nope, never mind. There we go. I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry to have caused the extinction of your race.
The fire he was protecting, the fire of a different outer god, can be used to burn the Erdtree, and after it's set ablaze, we are transported to Farum Azula. This is significant because the burning of the Erdtree represents the death of the Old Order, and since this order was responsible for producing an ego, when the Erdtree is burned, we are transported to a place which exists outside of time, i.e. we return to a pre-egoic state. In Farum Azula, apart from the ancient dragons, we also encounter a race of beings known as the Beastmen, who worship the dragons, and the dragons rule over them. This further captures the state of the psyche prior to the civilizing effects of culture and religion, when we were ruled by our unconscious natures, rather than ruling over it. This is also a key insight about the shadow, because the beasts in Elden Ring represent the shadow, and the real reason we have shadows is because of the fact that we are, at a fundamental biological and psychological level, beasts, animals. This beastliness needs to be controlled in order to have an ego, but its origins are in the primal animality which exists within every person. This animality is a source of constant pain for humans, as it means there is a side of us which resists our higher spiritual intentions. But in a place outside of time, when there is no ego, the shadows can live peacefully and content, just as animals live unburdened by consciousness. And it is here, outside of time, that we fight Queen Marika's shadow, who first appears to us as Geraint.
Tarnished. Why wouldst thou? Why? 'Tis no matter. I hereby vow that destined death shall not be stolen again. Stay away. Destined death.
I love how he's all like, tarnished? But I thought we were friends!
Before revealing his true identity as Malekith, the Black Blade. Malekith's titular Black Blade is itself the Rune of Death, which Marika plucked from the Elden Ring eons ago. In the Golden Order, death itself is repressed into the shadow, which is why the blade is found within Malekith's flesh. But in trying to bring forth a new order, it's necessary that the old shadow dies, and so we slay Malekith and take the Rune of Destined Death. The unbounded Rune of Destined Death returns death to the lands between, and when we return, we find that the illustrious city of Leyndell has been reduced to ash. This is the fate the Golden Order was attempting to forestall by controlling death and conquering the stars. But it's inevitable for any civilization. Though it may vainly attempt to resist the effects of time, all civilizations eventually collapse. Although the ego may attempt to resist any change, change will inevitably come sooner or later. The higher order is now broken, allowing space for a new order to come forth. We approach the Elden Throne again, and find the first Elden Lord Godfrey, who has recently returned from exile, mourning his son Morgott, who we slayed earlier.
It's been a long while, Morgott.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Alas, I am returned. To be granted audience once more.
You really think she's gonna take you back, dude? She prefers herself.
Upon my name as Godfrey,
Maybe not currently.
the first Elden Lord.
We must defeat him, since he will likely attempt to restore the kingdom which he helped to found. Godfrey has the great Lion Lord Siraj on his back, since Siraj is his shadow, and allows him to be a lord. But as our fight proceeds, Godfrey decides to unleash his shadow, absorbing it and becoming the savage warrior Hoarah. This represents letting the shadow loose, and allowing it to transform us into more primal beings. This can be dangerous if we lose control of our inner beast, but in some contexts, especially in a battle, we might be able to use our shadows and harness its power, as the shadow is indeed a source of immense strength. Channeling the shadow in a helpful manner like this is one way we can integrate the shadow, and give it room to exist without it completely consuming us. With Godfrey defeated, we finally enter the Erdtree. Within, we find Marika imprisoned, unable to move as she is totally dominated by her masculine side. As we approach, her hair suddenly transforms from gold to red, and Radahn, the male part of her, who has gained a will of his own, raises his hammer against us. And so it is our task to defeat the Emissary who believes he is the master, who is vainly attempting to hold on to an old order which is decaying. But when Radahn is at last defeated, the Elden Ring itself challenges us, transforming into the Elden Beast, a creature which embodies the greater will itself. And so we battle this cosmic entity in an amazing spectacle, and when he is at last defeated, we get the message, God slain, which I guess means we just killed God. But don't worry, because now we can choose. Do we attempt to restore order as it previously was, or do we attempt to use the Elden Ring to create a new order? Perhaps one where those who live in death are accepted, or one where the gods are entirely removed? Or do we just choose to destroy the entire world, because that's also an option? An option which has its own archetypal significance, which I don't really have the time to get into right now, because in case you didn't already know, this game is fucking massive. Well, like I said before, I chose to become Ranni's consort, because it means that we can venture to the moon, which is what I hope for humanity in general. to tread new paths and explore new domains, rather than stagnantly sticking with what is familiar. So that's why I chose that ending, not because I'm maidenless or anything. But remember, the story is not over, as the fate of Miquella is still unknown, and it appears that the Tree itself has a shadow. We will be exploring that shadow in the DLC and discovering what Miquella's ultimate plan really is. So if you want to see that video, please consider subscribing, and also please consider donating to me on PayPal, because then I'll be able to pay for all the costs of making that video. If it's not already clear, I love this video game. It's one of the best I've ever played. And as I've said many times on this channel, I view video games as the most important form of art which exists today. A lot of people haven't caught on to that, but I believe that video games have the potential to surpass all other forms of art in their ability to convey deep messages about the nature of human existence, while also supplying us with amazingly emotionally rich experiences. But that's all I have to say for now. Thanks for watching, have a good day, and may good luck always come your way.